50% of people, when they go into a real estate transaction, they cry.
Excuse me?
They actually cry because the transaction takes a long time, both for residential and commercial.
Meet Mohamed Omar, the founder of Tokunize and the guy who's flipping the real estate game on its head. He walked away from Cambridge to fix one of the most painful processes in modern life, buying a home. With Tokunize, he's cutting closing times by 5x, bringing buyers, sellers, lenders, and agents into one seamless flow. No more chaos, no more waiting, no more crying, just smart tech, smooth deals, and a bold new vision for home ownership. And if you're building a startup in real estate or trying to disrupt an outdated industry, this episode is your blueprint. This is the story of tearing down a broken system and rebuilding it from scratch.
So what would be your most important piece of advice to anyone who is looking to build startup in real estate?
Do what's really hard.
Okay, Mohamed, you have a big mission ahead. You are trying to make commercial real estate, which is exclusive and one of the highest barrier markets, more accessible to people. How are you planning to pull that off?
Yeah.
What is your plan?
It's a big quest and a big mission. For us at Tokunize, one of the ways we kind of saw the project that we're working on and the problem that we're tackling in real estate was to understand how do we make the real estate transaction in and of itself easier and more enjoyable. So the CEO of Zillow, in a recent book that he wrote, for example, he said that 50% of people, when they go into a real estate transaction, they cry. And
Excuse me?
they actually cry because the transaction takes a long time, both for residential and commercial. So for us and our product, we are focusing both on residential and commercial. Commercial is the one that's much harder to get right, due to the sheer size of the assets, the number of parties involved, but also with the residential. If me or you go to buy a property, let's say, because I think most people who are going to listen to this will probably relate at the individual level. When you're making a residential transaction for real estate, let's say you're the buyer, I'm the seller, you go to an estate agent, say, I like that property. You go to the estate agent and say, I'd like to put an offer in. Then the estate agent who represents me will now come to me and say, Asmal or person buyer A had put in an offer. Is that something that you want to sell at? I'll be like, okay, let's do it. So then once that happens, the estate agent will now come back to you and say, the offer's been accepted. Then you're now going to go to the bank. You're going to get a principal in agreement, which is an agreement from the lender, i.e. the bank, saying, you put in, let's say hypothetically the property is £1 million. You might say, okay, I'll put in 300k and I'll get 700k as a loan from the bank. So then the bank will tell you the terms, how long that loan is going to be, what the repayment package looks like, and so on and so on. And then at that point, you now go and you get a solicitor. You get a solicitor and I get a solicitor. So we both have our solicitors. In the UK, these are called conveyancers. It's just a solicitor or a lawyer who represents you during a real estate transaction and helps to make sure that the transaction, you're not, like, I'm not selling to you a false property, like it's not a scam, and they go through all of those checks and balances. So as I'm explaining, as the process is going on, you're starting to realize after the conveyancer, insurance company gets involved. At the same time, there's other little middlemen that get involved as well. So there's around a dozen different parties involved in a single real estate transaction. And with that number of parties, you see that the transaction costs are high, the time it takes. So for example, for a simple residential, it takes somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks. And so that's a long time, super stressful.
6 to 2 weeks, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Sorry, 6 to 12 weeks.
6 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, 6 to 12 weeks is still long.
It's still long.
Like 6 weeks is best case. Everything goes perfectly. There's not a single problem. If things get slowed down and it can go as long as 12 weeks, even 16 weeks sometimes. There's a multitude of different factors that go into play to kind of lead to that. It's a long time for a single and that's just a single transaction just between me and you. And then you increase that in the UK, on an annual basis. There's around 200,000 transactions to around 500,000 transactions. And so you get that number of pain points just at the residential level. And
It's a residential, which is much simpler. I understand
yeah,
compared to commercial real estate. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, essentially. And then
Yeah.
now you scale that up to commercial. So with me and my background, I worked at a real estate private equity fund, and we were predominantly transacting on so our split was around 60% residential and then non-residential, so 40% non-residential, whatever that non-residential was. And it just turned out that the non-residential transactions took at a time somewhere to close around 8 months, 9 months, and you have so many lawyers, yeah, so many accountants, so much money just being funneled down the drain. It's inefficient. The data is disintermediated. The lender has this platform they use. So, you see startups that have come into this space, and you've seen startups solve the problem for agents in the case of Redfin or Zillow, or well, Zillow is trying to go in the opposite way, but Redfin is a good example. They came into the space and they said, we're going to solve the problem for the estate agent. Then you had Quicken come into the space as a business startup, and they were like, we're going to solve this problem for the lender. But actually, for us and our mission and our core mission is to solve the entire transaction problem and make it easy and simple and efficient for all of the parties. So bring all parties onto one platform, and we're starting at the conveyancer level, at the solicitor that represents me, the seller, you, the buyer, and vice versa. And we've identified that because they they have to exist in the entire closing stage. Once we've agreed on our terms and have accepted your offer, once we get the legal entities involved, those legal entities at that point are going to be representing you and me for the entirety of the life cycle up until it's registered on the land registry that the ownership has now been transferred from me to you. And so they're very, very vital to the transaction process. And so we've identified that if we can make the day-to-day life of a conveyancer who's working on so many different deals at the same time 100 times better, 100 times easier, 100 times more efficient, more secure, then it means that it's going to cascade down to the buyer, the seller, the lender. And so we're bringing everyone onto one platform to make the experience of buying and selling real estate actually enjoyable and reducing the transaction cost.
Okay, I see. Well, I feel like it is very complicated, especially in from the legal perspective. I just want to share a couple of cases that I have encountered, not myself, but my very close friends here in London. So, a couple, they wanted to buy a house, and not just wanted, but they already prepared money for the down payment. They made sure that every financial state, all the transactions would be suitable in order to get the mortgage, and they did actually already get, I guess, approval for the mortgage, almost 700 or 800,000 pounds, which is quite high. But it's been over a year. They wanted to move in before the baby comes, but the baby came. But the house, they still couldn't buy the house. And they've been very stressed because, of course, there is a pregnancy and they wanted to get ready, and they didn't want to prolong their lease because they were planning, they kind of knew they would. They were so sure that, oh, okay, we're going to buy in no time. But for over a year, and it really took a toll on them because they were so stressed. And of course, there is all this viewings and negotiations, and then not being able to settle, not being able to close. It was very hard. And the other friend, they already settled on the house, and they are having problems. It's been over 3 months. They couldn't sign the deal. He doesn't understand why, and he was thinking about changing the solicitor, as you said, but he says that, oh, there have been so much done. I hope he will finish. And last month he came over, and he was again. We were like, oh, did you get it? Did you buy the apartment? Still no. It has been over 3 months, and he has been also very stressed about this. I think it must be very, very painful experience for most of the people. And I don't really understand how are you going to deal with all the legal parts like compliances, and how are you going to make sure that the buyer did actually get the house and is not going to have any problems
Yeah.
in the future.
First off, with the two anecdotes you gave of two different friends and the experience that they're going through, that's why 50% of people absolutely break down in the middle of a transaction, because it's overwhelming. It's one of the biggest investments. It's time consuming. It's overwhelming. You're constantly going back and forth. It's not in like a single place. For example, how do you feel? Take yourself back to, I don't know, 2006, and you couldn't just pick up your phone and book an Uber that picks you up from here. Or you couldn't be like, well, I'm hungry, I'm just going to order myself a Nando's and a Five Guys and a McDonald's. You have to call the restaurant. You have to say, well, I'm 15 minutes away. Can you send delivery? Da, 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 da. And if you're outside of the delivery radius, they'll be like, well, you're going to have to call the other shop. It was very broken up and you have to call another shop and you're like, well, I'm at this postcode. Can you guys come? If you see now the way that Deliveroo did it and the way Uber did it, by bringing transparency into our marketplace, that's what we're doing to real estate. So when you look at real estate, it's still like the way stocks were in the early 1900s. So stocks in 1900s, pretty much paper-based, but then there was a huge jump to digitize that market, to digitize that experience. And so you could pick up any stock investing platform right now, invest in any shares, and you can invest from as little as £1 or even less than that nowadays. You can invest all the way up to like 10 million if you wanted. A single click of a button, all the authorizations, all the checks, everything can kind of happen instantly, and it's very digitized. And for us, our vision and our mission and understanding is there's no reason why we cannot digitize the real estate experience so that me and you can transact easily with complete protection under the structure of the law and the compliance and everything in between. And it's a nice experience for all parties involved. So for us, we don't want to get, I think one way we see it at Tokunize and as a business and as a team is we're not a D2C business, so we're not direct to consumer business. We're not trying to come in like some of the other PropTech startups, which are successful in their own ways, and we're not trying to replace the people in that industry. For us, our fundamental goal for now, I suppose, in all honesty, is we want to make the job of the everyday person who's involved in real estate transactions better, easier, more efficient by building the infrastructure solution that allows for that to happen. There's competitors out there, but there's not like a unified system that allows all parties, including the lenders, to coexist, to exchange data, so that me and you as a buyer and a seller could just go to our platform and see here's a timeline of the transaction. It's expected to close at this date. It's at this point. Right now, the reason why it's at this stage and not progressing is because we're dependent on solicitor A or solicitor B, or we're waiting on the lender. And you can just see it's simple, like when you're waiting for your Uber, you can see 6 minutes away. It's at this corner. Doing that for the individual is something that you realize from a psychological point of view, that by just alleviating that stress of uncertainty, when is this going to close? Where is that at? Who are we waiting for?
Why are we stuck here?
Exactly.
And nobody answers it.
Exactly. So that's a huge part of what we want to do. We want to bring all the data into a single centralized platform where, for us to answer your question and not beat around the bush around the legals of the compliance and how do we make that happen, because at the end of the day, it's a huge investment. It's important to keep it safe, to keep it secure, and to make sure that it occurs in a way that the system is set up as it is, so that it allows for the most secure way of transacting on high value asset. You don't want to break it because you're like, we have to do the next generation stuff. We have to bring tech into it. We have to bring blockchain or AI or this into it. There's no point if you break apart the fundamental core of it has to be protected under, property rights. It has to be protected under the law. And so for us, we're not saying we're the agent or we're the conveyancer or we're the lender. We're keeping the structure. We're just making their day-to-day lives better, easier.
You're optimizing all those transactions. You're optimizing every party's work in that transaction.
Perfect.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I get it?
Perfect.
Oh my God.
You did it better.
I'm so happy I understood. It was, I understood better when you gave an example of like Deliveroo and everything. So otherwise, it was way above my head,
So that's the important facet of it. It's a bit like digitizing the experience. And we have a vision of, in 10 years time or in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. We're in constant dialogue with the land registry, with the HM land registry in the UK, which is a centralized government entity that holds all the title deeds. So if I've just sold the property to you, my solicitor would fill in a form, your solicitor would fill in a form that would get sent off to the land registry, and then that would represent to say, hey, here's the contract that was signed between me and you, saying I've transferred ownership, you've paid me to transfer that ownership of the property, and then the forms that have been filled out will also represent the change in ownership of that property from me to you, from the seller to the buyer. And then on the land registry, it's registered saying, now that property is owned by Asmal, and these are the terms that it was bought under, and so on and so on. One conversation of many that we've been having with the land registry is to understand that they want to put the title deeds that are on paper, that it's like half on paper, half digitalized. They would like to put that on the blockchain. So they would like to, what's referred to as tokenize it. So they would like to put it on the blockchain, and by putting it on the blockchain, it becomes fraud proof, like completely fraud proof. It also becomes extremely easy to access that data to the necessary parties, and understanding that that is their vision in 10 years means that we are positioning ourselves to first make the lives of the people in the transaction easier right now and building that infrastructure, and then optimizing the process, and then moving forward in the next 3, 5, 8, 10 years to then really work hand in hand, not only with the conveyancer, the lender, but actually also work hand in hand with the government and the land registry to make that reality of transacting on a blockchain, which is what they're working towards, a reality.
Yeah, well, it sounds very complicated, to be honest. I'm not going to go into more details on that part, but the point is that actually you did sign deals with potential clients, or like you already have partners that agree to work with you, right? And it is, I guess, a very strong proof that probably your idea, your mission is necessary for the real estate industry. So can you share what was the experience of getting those first customers or first partners, and being so early on your journey, on your startup journey? How did you convince them? And you mentioned partners, and it seems like they are not startups, but they are already established companies. And so what did it take for you to win them over beyond your charm and charisma?
It was very painful. It was very honestly, very painful. If I could explain it metaphorically, it was the equivalent of like you're taking a chainsaw to your own thighs. That's how painful it was. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. In a genuine sense, it took weeks. So it took weeks and weeks and weeks and months. So we've been working on this. We started this company April last year in 2024. We've pivoted more times than I can remember. And it took us up until end of November last year to get out of what's known to many people out of pivot hell. Just kept pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. And it was like, this is getting sick, guys. But we've kind of ended up at a place where inadvertently we were speaking to a developer, quite a large developer. So it has a base both in the UK, in South Africa, North Africa, and a little bit in Asia. And in that developer had mentioned that actually what we were doing before was like an investing marketplace for real estate, but allowing people to invest like £100 at a time. It's like, it could work. There's a lot of regulatory problems. You guys know that already. You're speaking to the regulators, you're doing this, you're doing that. But actually, if you could make the transaction experience between a single buyer and a single seller very easy, and you could show that you could show me that you could do that, then it's something that I'm willing to do a deal on, and to kind of introduce you to other partners as well. So then as a team, I think one of the brilliant things about the team that we've built together at Tokunize is it's an engineering based team. So none of us are trained engineers, but we have the mentality of engineers, in the sense that, and what I mean by that, because it's quite vague, it's like, so why is that beneficial? Why does anyone care? When you have like an engineering mindset, or like you're professionally trained as an engineer, you go to university to learn how to become an engineer, you kind of understand everything is broken down at its core, that it's systems, and you need to optimize a system. You need to kind of see, this is where the system is kind of structured, So as a startup, the way you kind of have to learn and think about it, the way we think about it as a team is there's the product, there's the sales, there's the marketing. Each one of those, it's its own unique system that goes into an overall output, which is the business. And each one has each one essentially has in its totality, there's inputs, outputs, feedback loops. And so that's the way engineers think about their day-to-day jobs, right? So when that developer told us that, it was like, cool, that's a good feedback. And now we need to realize we've had all of this playing with the regulator on why we can't do an investing marketplace without getting all of these licenses. That's going to take time and a lot of resources. And as a startup, we can't hope to go to market once we get a license because we don't even know if that's going to be a successful business endeavor. And so by getting that feedback from that developer, we said, this is a tangible pain point from a potential user. And if it's a pain point for this sample size of one, we need to go speak to others in more detail to understand if it's something that works for them. So we spoke to them and we spoke to a few other developers, some lawyers that work in real estate, a few lenders, and they genuinely said, if you can make our day-to-day jobs easier, and we don't really care the technology you use, as long as it meets the kind of requirements that we have for compliance and for data management and all these things like GDPR and so on and so on, and you can prove that it works, would be over the moon to actually do a test because it's going to make everyone else's job in the industry better, easier. So to come back to your question with regards to how do we convince those people to get on board without kind of going on a random monologue, we built a network of family offices from our previous kind of different pivots and things that we were testing. And from those family offices, we went back to one of them in the US and we said, hey, we have a solution that will allow you to buy. So he's a real estate investor. And so he's done numerous deals from commercial, residential. And we said to him, this time we're not kidding around. This time, like on a serious level, we have a solution that will allow you to buy real estate in the UK. And we want to test it out in the UK and get it right in the UK before kind of expanding into other markets. And he was an international investor or buyer. Not only can we save you at least 50% of time, but we'll be able to save you transaction costs as well. And we'll be able to make your life much easier. And he said, you know what, guys, I've known you for a while. I have faith and you work with my legal team. I have, a set of accountants that I work with. And so I want to buy a £10 million property in London and work with you guys to make that proof of concept a reality. So that is something we're going through at the moment and kind of proving out everything we've spoken about so far, but on that specific property, very high value property. And the reason, I know it sounds wild to think, why would you not do something easy? Why would you go for like a very challenging £10 million property where there's a lot of legal process involved, complex financial kind of optimization involved? It's because if we can do it at that very complex level, we can easily do it at a very simple level. And so we kind of want to work backwards as opposed to go working forwards. So that's on that side with that 10 million asset. And then we then went to kind of institutional sized developers or builders. And we said to them, hey, this is what we're looking to do. You guys have R&D budgets. Your R&D budgets are so let's say like you have a builder and they would normally put their R&D budgets towards the on the ground. So things that are important, but not important to someone like in my line of business. So things that are important in the sense of like sustainable concrete, for example, when they're building the build. So there's startups that work on things like that. So these builders and these institutional developers, their R&D budgets, they're putting it towards these sort of startups and businesses like that and seeing, well, we have money to burn and to see, and they're making money, like you'd never believe. And so we went to them and said, how about we improve the back end of your transaction flow so we can reduce the time, we can work with you, and if it works, we're happy to come to some sort of agreement in terms of you as an investor in the business, or strategically that would work better for everyone. They already have the network effects. It would improve the scale that the business can grow. And so our bet is over the next 6 to 12 months, do somewhere between 50 to 100 properties. And then after that, with these institutional partners, go to partner with other institutional entities, and via the network effects, make it an industry. Because at the end of the day, the entire industry can benefit from something like this. It's a known problem, so it's a clear target audience, like customer base, and you're solving a known problem with a clear go-to market for a clear set of customers. And that means it can just be vertically scaled after that network effect comes into gear.
I understand. So, but you just mentioned that it was very painful, and you mentioned about the pivot hell. How did you get through that? And I'm sure that you're still on your way and you still have a lot to change. Well, probably. And how are you getting through that? I mean, it's been a year, right? Yeah, a year.
Yeah.
Now a year. Yeah, now a year. So how is it going? Are you making money out of it?
Now, yes.
Now, yes.
Now, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm very happy for you.
Thank you.
What made you continue working on this idea? Why did you stick with it? Why didn't you quit during that hell? I mean, if you said so, it was hell and it was very painful.
I think it's a function of, like, I have my own personal why that grounds me a lot, which is I want to grow businesses and make an impact on people in the most positive way going. Very generic, very, very, very generic. And it comes from a place whereby I grew up for a few years with my grandmother in Italy, in Siena. And she used to run a B2B business whereby she would supply, like, those like automatic water dispenser machines where you can put those massive canisters on top. She used to basically provide those cannons to she used to source those and then sell those on to local businesses, like whatever it might be. And I when I was younger at the time, she would give me small menial things like, oh, go research, da da da, da, or can you go to them and speak to them and say, what are they looking for? Was the last delivery good? Would they like to negotiate? It didn't matter because I would come back and I'd be like, oh, they said this and da da da, and I would annoy people. But it was a thing of, at that point I learned that working on your own business and could see the way like it had such a huge positive impact on my grandmother was something that I wasn't getting when I worked in private equity. I was getting paid amazing, was working between London and New York, and it was great. And I thought I had everything that I wanted. And then I think it just hit me at one point where I was just like, I'll probably make a lot of money from this. It will be great. I'll have a great title in a couple of years and so on and so on. But I want to make like a tangible impact in an industry that I actually have a lot of passion for. I'm a bit of like a real estate nerd and understanding the ins and outs and why you do things like this and why you don't do things like that and why some asset classes perform in different jurisdictions because of this, and the factors that go into it. And so because of all of that, I knew that I wanted to go into real estate. I went into real estate, work in that finance role, but I wanted to stay in real estate and do things I wanted to change the way that the industry works at its foundational core. And then as a consequence, I was super, super lucky to have come across my co-founder and then to come across a few other team members who are working on the business with us now. And everyone's vision and understanding is that, hey, we are solving a fundamental problem. And by focusing very, very niche to begin with, we can change the way real estate transactions occur, not only in the UK and where we are right now, but actually across borders. Because one of the things that I understand, but I also don't understand, is why real estate transactions are so poor across borders. So if I try to buy a property in Spain right now, it's hell. If someone's in Singapore and they try to buy a property in London, it's hell. And it's kind of understanding, building a set of infrastructure such that if someone wants to buy across that landscape, it can be much, much easier, much more enjoyable and less stressful. And I think it's a consequence of my why, an amazing, amazing team who are high agent in and of themselves and super driven and understand not only what they want to get out of the business, but the change and impact they want to make as a courtesy of the business. And then those two things meant that they really kept driving me on in that time period. And to be honest, in real honesty, randomly coming across that developer who said, you guys are thinking about a problem like this. Why don't you just reframe kind of like that mechanical engineering or engineering kind of mindset. Just reframe and go from a one-to-many, i.e. an investing marketplace, to a one-to-one transaction platform, and making that much, much better. And then focus on very niche set of audience. He said that can win out in this space because real estate is very paper-based still. It needs to be digitized. It needs to become more efficient, etc., etc. And if you can build that infrastructure, then it's a thing. So that huge kind of luck at the end really changed the dynamic. And then around late November last year, that changed our trajectory.
Yeah, you pivoted big at that point.
Yeah, significantly.
Yeah, significantly. Very good, very good. It's great that you started earning, but throughout the year before maybe revenue, you bootstrapped, right?
Yes.
Yes. And how did it go? How did you manage it? How did you manage your funds? I mean, did you have some kind of budget hacks or budgeting strategy that helped you keep the burn rate low? How did it go?
I think with regards to that, I was very lucky to have found a co-founder who's kind of similar alignment, in the sense that we both had like I had quite a bit of ample savings from my previous job, and he was also kind of in a similar-ish position where he'd been working whilst he was at uni. He just kept saving, and so we were at a place where when we came in, we said, cool, it would actually work better for us to bootstrap, because the nature of what we started off doing was very, very complex and very capital intensive. And so in all honesty, we'd gone to like a few different investors. We had chats with them, went to very late stage discussions. But it just turned out where it was like, when you're building an investing marketplace for real estate and you're building on new technologies such as the blockchain, the issue is most investors kept turning around and saying, yeah, that's all well and great, but you're depending on licenses from the Financial Conduct Authority. That's capital intensive. We just don't think it's the right step to take, to be like, I'm going to invest in a risky business anyway, i.e. the nature of a startup, and at least 50-60% of that is going to go towards getting a license. It's not efficient. It's a super high risk. And so we kept getting that, and then small pivots here, small pivots there. But in that time period, everything was just bootstrapped from our savings, and understanding that we kind of just have to sustain it for as long as possible. We maintained it for as long as possible, being just me and him. And really, so a lot of times we would work out of my apartment, and that was our office. That is predominantly still our office most of the time nowadays. But like minimizing costs in the best way forward is small things like that. But other than that, I'll be honest, we've tried our best to minimize costs, but it's the biggest way we minimized our costs is we didn't go and employ anyone for as long as we could manage. And that just meant that we kept telling ourselves we're two madmen trying to make something happen.
I understand. Do you have plans to fundraise?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So far, you have kind of a version of a product and you already are earning. And why do you think you need to fundraise? I mean, what would you like to improve, or what would you like to change?
So just to clarify on the earnings, right?
Yeah.
We've agreed, but the invoice is still pending.
Oh, okay, I see.
But it should come through over the next couple weeks, as we're doing this proof of concept. But in principle, everything's been agreed and signed. But just as a clarification, but as a factor of why do we want to fundraise, I think we realized that we've touched upon like a very foundational, fundamental problem in the real estate space, in the real estate transaction space. And so with regards to that, we want to scale the team. And not for the sake of scaling the team, but we want to scale the team on the side of the development side. So development side in terms of building out the product, and clearly, because we're trying to build our infrastructure, it means that it is product heavy. There's a lot of product that needs to be built out, and courtesy of that, at the moment, we have 2.5 people, the half being me. I wasn't much of a coder or building out like a product, but I have taught myself more and more as the months have gone by, because we have 2 people building it out as of now, and we understand that by at least doubling that, we can exponentially increase the output. So that's at the core of it. Right now, with the product and where it's at, it's a vertical SaaS solution. So being a vertical SaaS solution, it means that we can go to market much quicker. So we're targeting a lot of SMEs, small, medium enterprises, and it means that we can scale it much, much quicker. And as a courtesy of that, to win out as the fundamental infrastructure that everyone uses in real estate transactions, or to be the key player in that space, it means that we have to move very, very fast and very, very aggressively. And that's the reason why we want to raise. So we want to do the proof of concept with a £10 million property transaction. And then after that, we want to do a few more properties with these developers. And then as we can show that, guys, it works, and this isn't just a bluff and things like that, we can then go to market, and with that, bring in the right people to really bolster and go like 100x faster.
Yeah, I see. You want to just speed up the process.
Essentially.
Yeah. Okay, great. You are building the startup in real estate world in this very complicated industry. In my opinion, really, I guess it is very, very complicated. So what would be your most important piece of advice to anyone who is looking to build startup in real estate? I mean, maybe something that was not very obvious to you, but you were already in real estate, nuances. But other than that, just building your own company in the real estate world, what would you say that your most important insight was during this journey?
Yeah. Most important is really hard.
Yeah, okay, well,
Listen, good question. It's a good question. I gotta think about it for a second, but it is really hard. It is really hard.
something that you wish you knew.
I would say do what's really hard. Because you just said, right? You just said that do what's really hard in the sense that, like you mentioned, real estate is challenging. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different parties involved. How are you then going to fundamentally go from 0 to 1 and turn the industry on its head and say, hey, you guys do things like this, and you have these processes like this that work day to day, but actually in 6 months' time, it's going to change to this, and it's going to be fast, it's going to be more efficient, it's going to be more fraud-proof, it's going to be more compliant. How do you convince people? That's really, really hard, right?
Very hard.
If I'm trying to change my own personal behavior and I have a habit, and you come to me and you say, well, there is this habit that's going to improve your life experience. I'm like, yeah, sure, Asmal, but I don't know, I'm lazy, I don't know, I'm a human being, I'm used to sticking to my habits. But then if you now take that and you take it to an organizational level, it is like daunting, it's like scary. But I would genuinely say, I would genuinely say, like, yeah, the fundamental bit of advice is to go to the customer, whichever industry that you want to go into, and identify the problem that they think they have, and then keep being annoying and bugging them to understand the foundational problem that's driving that surface level problem. And once you understand that, go into a space where it's really challenging, because then you have limited number of competitors, you have a clear go-to-market strategy, and you can build a platform and not a feature. Don't get me wrong, a feature is a great thing to build. There's a lot of successful businesses, more successful than my business, that have built amazing feature-based businesses, but it's about downside protection whilst maximizing the chance of being successful. And by building a platform, you could have so many different roads to success and really scaled success. And so with saying all of that, what I'm trying to say is you kind of have to have like a risk-adjusted risk-adjusted kind of positioning for the solution you're bringing to market. And if you can identify a known problem to a known customer with a clear go-to-market strategy and where there's competitors, it's a good way to go. And so coming back to what the advice would be, firstly is don't listen to one person's advice. But secondly, it would definitely be do something that's really challenging, that's vertically scalable, and it's repeatable. So like for us and what we're doing, the solution is repeatable for the next transaction and the transaction after that and the transaction after that. So you can hire people and make them come to the team, and it's just, you can build it much quicker. But if it's something that's unique for each unique user and it's challenging and it's not scale, there's a lot of different problems you come into as a first-time founder like myself.
I see. It sounds a little hard what you said, but yeah, I get it. I get it. Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for the great questions. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I also had a lot of fun. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing your story and your experience.
Thank you.